And we apologize, but with the sudden passing of Deacon Jones this week, we were unable to do this segment in video, but we wanted to get it out in a timely fashion in Deacon's honor. So with that, please enjoy this audio segment of Fourth and Pain. And on a somber note, Adam, also this week marks the passing of an all-time great, a gentleman who played one season for the Washington Redskins, but left a lasting legacy not only here in Washington, but around the entire league. We're talking about Deacon Jones, who passed away at the age of 74. And Adam, I know that having played in St. Louis before coming to Washington, where Deacon spent the majority of his career in the Rams organization, I know that you have to have some thoughts on him.
Absolutely. I actually had the opportunity to meet him, and he came and talked to our team, and then he specifically came and talked to our D line. And we actually had some veterans in the room at the time, guys who'd been in the league 10, 11, 12 years, and they kind of had the look in their eye that a lot of rookies get when they come into a locker room for the first time and see a lot of guys on NFL teams. So that just shows you how much respect everyone has for him. And it was interesting. You could tell he honestly believed that if he was given a helmet and shoulder pads, he could line up and play that day. He was very enthusiastic, very energetic, loved football, and I was very riveting to listen to him. And it's very sad of his passing.
I mean, you're talking about a guy, he was an 8-time Pro Bowl selection, 5-time all-time a 5-time first-team All-Pro, a member of the NFL's 75th anniversary all-time team. But again, he's going to be most remembered. People time it again this week, most remember him for coining the term sack. I mean, people forget before Deacon Jones, a sack was just a tackle of the quarterback. It was what it was. They didn't even start counting stats until after his playing days were done.
Yeah, it's amazing because he came up with this because he kept tackling the quarterback in the backfield, but they didn't have a stat for it. So he came up with the term sack. And then they didn't even start keeping it until 1982. So nobody really knows how many he had. I believe the estimation or the guess is that he had about 173, 174 throughout his career. And he said that he kept a log in his journal of how many sacks he had. And he said, I believe it was one of his last years of his career. He had dwindled down or something to those effect. He said in his words, he only had 15 sacks in a 14 game season.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm looking at his unofficial sack totals right now that have been posted on Wikipedia. So, I mean, take that with a grain of salt. But I looked to this 1967 season where he recorded 26 sacks in only 14 games. I believe that would still be an all-time record today, even though we play 16 games in a year.
Well, I believe the record right now is Strahan has it. What is it, like 22, 22 and a half? And that's an amazing record in itself. But yeah, 26 would without a doubt beat that. I think the only reason he's not credited with the single season sack record is because nobody knows for sure. I really wish they'd go back through the videos of and all of his game films. I wish they'd count it up so we could know the total because I think it would be astounding.
Well, I think that that's definitely a project for NFL Films. And certainly, this is a guy that not only put the sack on the map, but he coined the term. And Adam, I know that you have a quote in particular that you took from Deacon Jones and you kind of identify with this being a defensive end yourself.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And well, actually, let's drop that quote at the end of this segment. We'll do a little bonus words of wisdom. How about that? A little special one just for Deacon Jones, and I'll drop that little quote because I love the quote. Let's talk about some of the guys that he influenced, and some of the guys. He's one of the greatest pass rushers of all time. He's up there with the Reggie White. He's up there with the Bruce Smith, the Lawrence Taylor. Why don't you talk about those guys for a little bit? How you think he influenced them?
I mean, to compare him to baseball, he would be the Babe Ruth, the original slugger in baseball. That's the equivalent of Deacon Jones as a defensive end. Anybody worth their weight in gold along the defensive line went through Deacon Jones, or Deacon Jones at least opened the door and really put defensive end on the map. Before then, you're really only hearing about your quarterbacks, your running backs, your wide receivers. Some things never change. But even kickers, for God's sakes, before he came along. So then you talk about guys like Reggie White. Reggie White, largely thought to be one of the greatest defensive ends to ever play the game. This is, the guy that went from Green Bay to Philadelphia. You can look at modern day. You can look at a guy like Jared Allen and say that, he's been influenced by Deacon Jones just by virtue of the fact that he's a guy that's always in the backfield, always disrupting things. You could look at a guy in Washington, Dexter Manley, Bruce Smith, who played here, Jason Taylor, another former Redskin, Julius Peppers, Michael Strahan, who we've already talked about, Leslie O'Neal, Al Baker, Chris Dolman. I mean, the list goes on and on and on and on. It's really a who's who of defensive ends, all of whom pale in comparison to Deacon Jones, in my opinion.
Well, there's something a lot of people may not know is he was timed at running a 4.5 which he may be the fastest D end in the NFL today with a 4.5 He also was known for his head slap, and basically it's illegal now, but he would slap the head of the offensive lineman just to get them to blink. And he would basically say, all I need is for you to blink. And he would beat you. That's all I needed to win and get the sack. And one thing that speaks to him just as a human being and how quality he was, and I got a little bit of a look into this when I met him. When Bruce Smith became the all-time sack leader, even though nobody knows how many Deacon had, he invited Bruce out and he celebrated Bruce becoming the all-time sack leader in the NFL. And one last little nugget, I know we got to end this segment. One last little nugget, we've talked about NFL players who would make great pro wrestlers. Deacon Jones would make a great pro wrestler. If you ever listen to some of his quotes or watch his videos on NFL films, I mean, he drops some of the greatest promos ever. He, without a doubt, just his little head slap promo where he talks about all I needed for you to blink to beat you, he would have been one of the greatest pro wrestlers of all time.
Well, a time passed, a man taken too soon. Deacon Jones, may he rest in peace. Adam, on the other side, we're going to come back, talk about things a little more bright, a little more cheery. We're going to talk about WWE, of which Deacon Jones would have fit right in. But before we roll out, before we put the kibosh on this segment, how about we do a little bonus words of wisdom like you talked about?
This sounds good. I'll let you drop the normal. And now here's the words of wisdom for Adam. But one last line. I think Deacon Jones was the Muhammad Ali of pass rushers.
Oh, yeah, I can see that. Had all that style, all that swag, and went out there and got the job done before his time. So with that, and now, words of wisdom with Adam Carriker.
It's like devastating a city or creaming a multitude of people. It's like putting all the offensive players in a sack, and I beat on that sack with a baseball bat. Deacon Jones on coining the term sack.